I want to show how you can make an ordinary set-in sleeve into a raglan sleeve. Now, for the purpose of the camera and the screen, I'm going to use half-scale blocks rather than full-scale blocks. So here we have the front, the sleeve and the back. First of all, I'm not going to trace my blocks out onto pattern paper. You may prefer to trace your blocks out onto pattern paper in order to do this exercise and to make your flat patterns. I'm going to go straight from the block. So my first thing I want to do is to think of what shape I want the raglan sleeve to be. So I'm coming from the neck, and roughly speaking I'm going to come down into a curve like this, down to roughly to this notch. So there's my new shape for the raglan. If you think that my raglan seam will now do something like this. And on the back I'm going to give a line too. So coming from the back neck, I want it to come down almost to those double notches. Now I don't know if that is actually spot on how I want it, because I'm somebody that works on the stand and likes to work three-dimensional. I cut my patterns and I always check the shape out on the stand using some calico. So these are my new lines. I'll just draw that line in a little bit darker so you can see it. Now what needs to happen in a raglan is that this part here, top of the shoulder, because this is the shoulder seam, gets joined on to the sleeve, onto the sleeve head. Now the easiest way to do that, I'm just going to line this up on the grain line, using the lines of the paper to help me. That's it. I need to attach this armhole seam to the head of my sleeve, just as if I was sewing it in as a set-in sleeve. Now I get a little bit of extra fabric here, and that's no bad thing, because the sleeve has got to, the raglan sleeve comes along the shoulder and down the centre of your arm all in one, so it's good to have a little bit of ease there. So I'm going to join this on to here. So I'm literally going to draw it round. There's my notch. I'll just draw in my original head of my sleeve. Now taking a tracing wheel, I'm going to trace that new shape that I drew earlier for my seam line of my raglan. Now you probably can't see that drawn through line on the camera very well, but I will go over it again in a minute. And that's like taking that pattern piece off and putting it onto my sleeve head. I'm going to do the same as at the back. So I'm lining up my notches and taking this almost to the head of the sleeve. Now you'll notice when I do this that my shoulders don't meet, because there's always a little bit of ease in the set-in sleeve around the head. So I've got quite a gap there, not to worry for the minute. And I draw around my shoulder, and from that double notch I'm drawing the shape that I'm looking at, which is that. I'll just draw that in there. I realise I should have drawn my whole sleeve in first, so I'm just going to do that. There we are. So you can see these two pieces, I shade it there and there, are the two pieces from my front and my back, which I've taken off there and joined onto my sleeve. And so when I come to make the patterns for my front and back, obviously I will then trace this line again, and my front pattern will be that. without the shoulder, because the shoulder's gone on there, now onto my sleeve. But we're just looking at the sleeve pattern for now. Some raglan sleeves will come down and be a two-piece sleeve. You'll have your front, your back, and you've got a centre seam running down the arm. Other raglan sleeves, you'll just have a dart that comes in as the shoulder and finishes just past the shoulder point. I'm going to do that. So to make the dart, I'm going to drop down all 1.5. Now this is half scale, remember, so if I was doing it full scale, it would be about 3 centimetres that I drop down from the head of the sleeve. And that's going to be my dart point. So if I was coming along this line, which is my shoulder, there's no seams on this, remember, I would come down into there, and that would become, this part here, would become my front raglan sleeve. I'm going to keep it all in one and bring it into a dart. So again, I bring the back one down, curving nicely. A lot of this is using your eye. Now, as I say, that might not be right. I could make that up into calico, pop it on the stand, and it needs tweaking slightly. I might need to take out a little bit of a bump or something like that. But that, if you're flat pattern cutting, is going to be your raglan sleeve. And you can see here, I'll do it in biro just so you can see this line better. I'm just going over my tracing wheel perforations. I don't like using biro when I'm pattern cutting, but for the purpose of the camera, I will. That one runs nicely. This one just a bit of an awkward shape. And again, if I made that up in calico to test it, might need a little bit of tweaking. Here's the shoulder line. That's coming down into a dart. And that's coming down into a dart. And there's my apex of my dart. So if I was to rub this out now, if I rub the head of my sleeve out now, like that, can you see the shape of the raglan sleeve? And as I say, if I wanted to put a seam, a central seam down the middle, then that would be my front. This would be my front sleeve, and this would be my back sleeve. You've got notches here, which won't move, because these are your balance notches, so you can still put your notches in, which correspond with your front pattern, which has a notch, and your back pattern, which has a notch. And that's your raglan sleeve.